What if I told you that hidden inside the grand palaces of Europe, among silk gowns and golden crowns, lived a secret that was never meant to be revealed? A secret so powerful, it could destroy entire dynasties. In the year 1793, while the streets of Paris ran red with revolution, across the Atlantic, in the colonies of the New World, a very different kind of revolution was quietly being born. On a sugar plantation, where enslaved men and women were treated as property, a child was conceived. But this was no ordinary child. Her father was a European nobleman, her mother a slave trapped in chains, and their child carried both the scars of slavery and the blood of royalty. Imagine this, a baby born in a wooden shack surrounded by fields of cane, destined to be forgotten. Yet, that same child would one day wear a crown. The world would call her queen. But history would try to erase her name. How does a slave become a queen? What secrets were buried to keep her story hidden? And why, more than 2 centuries later? Are we only now uncovering the truth? Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll begin to question every portrait of royalty you've ever seen. This is the forgotten bloodline of 1793, the story of the slave who became a queen. The year is 1793. France is burning. The revolution has toppled a king, and the guillotine drinks blood every day. Across Europe, thrones shake and empires tremble. But far from the chaos of Paris, another world exists, a world built on chains. In the Caribbean and the American South, sugar plantations stretched like endless oceans. But behind the sweetness of sugar was a horror few dared to speak of. Enslaved men and women lived under the lash. They worked from before sunrise to after sunset, their backs scarred, their names erased. To their masters, they were not people. They were property, and for enslaved women, life was even darker. Many were forced into the beds of their owners. Their bodies were not their own. They carried children who were never meant to belong, children born of violence, of power, of secrecy. Some of these children were sold, others were hidden, because if the truth of their blood ever escaped, it could unravel the fragile image of Europe's pure dynasties. Picture it. A grand plantation house glowing with candlelight. Inside, a nobleman raises his glass of French wine. Outside, just yards away, hundreds of enslaved people huddle in wooden shacks, hungry, broken, and afraid. But tonight, inside one of those shacks, a woman clutches her newborn child. Her skin is dark, her chains heavy, but the baby in her arms carries royal blood, blood that was never meant to survive. This was the reality of 1793, the world where race, power, and bloodlines collided. A world where one mistake, one birth, could bring down an entire dynasty. And in this world, the story of our forgotten queen begins. In the darkness of the plantation night, while the masters feasted inside their glowing mansions, a woman gave birth in silence. Her cries were muffled, swallowed by the thick Caribbean air. Her name is lost to history, but her child would become legend. She was enslaved. Her body was not her own. Her life was not her own. But the child she now held in her trembling arms, the child carried the blood of her captor, a nobleman whose name still echoed in Europe's courts. Imagine the fear that lived inside her heart. If the overseers discovered the truth, the baby could be taken, sold, or worse, killed. If the nobleman admitted his secret, scandal could erupt and destroy him. So she hid her child. Every lullaby she whispered, every prayer she offered to the night sky, was a shield against the world outside. But secrecy comes at a cost. The mother knew she could not protect her child forever. Whispers spread quickly on plantations. Slaves talked, overseers listened, and masters punished. So she carried her secret with desperation. She would braid her daughter's hair differently, feed her when no one was watching, hide her away when the masters came near. Every night as the cane field slept, she asked herself the same question. Will my child live as a slave? Or will she live as a queen? Some say she sought help from a sympathetic priest who recorded the child's baptism under a false name, concealing the father's identity. Others claim the nobleman himself arranged to send the girl away across the sea, where her mixed heritage could be disguised. History doesn't agree on the details. But one truth remains. This mother carried her child's future like a burning secret. One mistake, and both of them would pay with their lives, and yet, through her fear, through her silence, she planted the first seed of destiny, a seed that would grow into power, into wealth, into royalty. The slave mother may never have worn a crown, but through her blood, her daughter would. The child of the slave grew, but her existence was a problem no dynasty wanted to face. In the eyes of the law, she was property. In the eyes of her father, she was an inconvenient truth. And in the eyes of society, she was impossible. Europe's nobility prided themselves on pure bloodlines. Every marriage was a chess move, every birth carefully recorded. But behind closed doors, the same noblemen who demanded purity were secretly fathering children with enslaved women, children they could never acknowledge, children they could never allow to inherit. Some of these children were quietly sent away. Some were forced into convents where their voices were silenced forever. Others simply disappeared, and yet a few survived. You've heard whispers of this before. In America, Thomas Jefferson, the man who wrote "All men are created equal," secretly fathered children with Sally Hemings, his enslaved servant. For 2 centuries, the truth was denied, until DNA proved it undeniable. The same pattern repeated across Europe. Hidden bloodlines, whispered scandals, and betrayals buried in archives. Now imagine the danger if even one of these children tried to claim their birthright. If the daughter of a slave declared she was heir to nobility. If she dared to challenge the throne, it wouldn't just be scandal, it would be treason. So what did they do? They lied, they erased. They betrayed their own flesh and blood to protect crowns made of gold. The girl at the center of our story was caught between 2 worlds. A world of chains, and a world of crowns. She carried her mother's scars, and her father's name in silence. And while the nobles pretended she didn't exist, she was watching, learning, waiting, because betrayal cuts deep, and for this forgotten child, betrayal would become the fire that forged her destiny. The child grew into a young woman, carrying the weight of 2 worlds on her shoulders. She was the daughter of a slave. But her face, her bearing, her intelligence betrayed the blood of her father's house. She is too refined to be a servant. She speaks as if educated. Her eyes, they do not belong to the fields. Rumors spread through the colony, and those rumors reached Europe. Whether by chance or design, she was taken across the sea, to the very world her father once abandoned. There, in the glittering courts of Europe, she was transformed. Her African features were softened in portraits. Her past was erased with new names, new documents, and to the nobles who met her, she was no longer the daughter of a slave. She was an exotic mystery, a woman who turned heads with every glance. But she was more than beauty. She was clever. She listened, she learned, she maneuvered. She knew the game of power was not played with swords, but with secrets, and she had carried secrets her entire life. Imagine the irony. The same bloodline that once chained her mother now welcomed the daughter into its courts. Noblemen who would have spat at her birth now bent to win her favor. History calls this assimilation, but in truth, it was conquest. Not with armies, but with presence. Not with war, but with survival. And then, the impossible happened. Through marriage, wealth, and alliances, she rose higher. Step by step, she climbed the ladder of nobility. Until one day, she stood not as a servant, but as a queen. A crown was placed upon her head. Jewels sparkled where once there were shackles. A throne beneath her. Where once there was dirt, the world would never admit her true blood. But in that moment, the daughter of a slave ruled. But with power comes danger. Every throne carries enemies, and for a queen born of secrets, every whisper, every shadow, could mean betrayal. For years she wore the crown. Her rule was quiet, graceful, but shadowed by whispers. Some courtiers said she was too different. Others claimed her beauty was unearthly. A few even suggested that her blood carried something forbidden, but none dared to speak it aloud. Not in public, not against a queen, and then she was gone. Some say illness took her, others believe she was poisoned. But the truth is buried in archives too carefully edited, too deliberately cleansed. The dynasty erased her memory. Paintings were altered. Records destroyed. Her name replaced with silence. Why? Because to admit her story was to admit a crime. That slavery and nobility were bound together not just by money, but by blood. Think about it. How many European houses, how many American dynasties, how many noble families carry bloodlines they will never acknowledge? How many pure thrones are anything but pure? History teaches us names and dates, but history hides bloodlines. Somewhere in the halls of Europe, there may still be portraits of this queen tucked away, gathering dust, her face painted pale, her heritage erased, and yet her blood flows on, through forgotten children, through lost branches of family trees, through descendants who may be walking among us today, never knowing the crown that once belonged to their ancestor. She was born in chains. She rose to a throne, and then she was buried beneath silence, but silence is never eternal, because blood remembers, and history, eventually, whispers the truth. But here's the part that no one dares to speak. Her story didn't just end because hidden in the royal archives. Lie fragments, letters, diaries, records, locked away in vaults that only a handful of scholars have ever seen. And those fragments suggest something darker. What if she wasn't erased simply because of her blood? What if she knew something, a secret so dangerous, that removing her from history was the only way to protect the dynasty? Somewhere in those dusty halls, sealed behind iron doors, her story still exists. A page, a confession, a truth waiting to resurface, and when it does, it won't just rewrite her story. It could unravel the legitimacy of an entire royal bloodline. Imagine it, a throne we celebrate today built not on purity, but on a bloodline born from slavery, secrecy, and betrayal. Think about why governments and dynasties guard their archives so closely. It isn't just about protecting national treasures, it's about protecting power. And power is always built on secrets. In the next chapter, we'll peel back another layer. Because the Queen's story doesn't just end with her death. Her descendants may have played a role in shaping the very world we live in today. And if that's true, then her shadow still walks among us. You see, erasing her from history didn't erase her bloodline. Because blood doesn't disappear. It flows, silently, invisibly, through marriages, through children whose names were carefully hidden, through generations that blended into noble families, and even into the world we know today. What if I told you that her descendants may have sat at the tables of power, that they may have influenced wars, politics, revolutions, without ever knowing where their story began? In a set of classified letters rarely seen outside the archives, there are hints. Hints of marriages arranged not for love, but for containment. Marriages designed to bury her blood inside acceptable houses, as if the dynasty knew that the truth could never surface. But here's the twist. Those hidden unions may have linked her lineage to some of the most powerful dynasties alive today. Yes, the families we still read about in magazines, see on television, follow in politics. What if her blood flows in their veins? Think about that. The children of a forgotten slave queen, possibly walking among us cloaked in wealth and influence, with no idea of the shadows they carry, and maybe, just maybe, some of them do know. Because in certain secret circles and whispered family tales, the truth has survived. A forbidden story passed down not through history books, but through bloodlines themselves. If this is true, then her erasure wasn't just about shame. It was about control. Because whoever controls the story controls the throne. And here's the real question. What if these hidden heirs one day decide to claim what was denied to her? A throne, a crown, a legacy. Would the world accept them? Or would history repeat itself, burying the truth once again in silence? Every dynasty leaves behind more than jewels and palaces. They leave records. But not all records are meant for the public. Some are sealed, locked away in iron chests, guarded in the deepest rooms of state archives, where only the trusted few may enter. And in those forbidden halls, whispers of her story remain, a letter here, a diary entry there, enough to suggest a truth too dangerous to publish. In 19th century France, one archivist claimed to have found a hidden genealogy, tracing a royal bloodline back to a woman whose name was scratched out. In Britain, a scholar once noted in his private journal, the Queen was not who she was said to be. That page was quietly removed, the journal locked away. And in Germany, whispers of an entire collection of documents seized by the state, never to be seen again. Why hide these papers? Why erase these names? Because history is fragile. One document, one diary, one confession could unravel centuries of carefully constructed lies. Imagine walking into an archive, dust swirling in the air, and finding a sealed folder marked with the crest of a dynasty. Inside, names you've never heard, but bloodlines that connect directly to the most famous rulers in Europe. Would you believe it? Or would you fear it? Some claim these documents still exist in private collections, passed down like cursed relics from generation to generation, guarded not because they are valuable, but because they are dangerous. And here's the chilling part. In certain circles, powerful people pay fortunes just to keep these documents hidden, because the moment the truth comes out, crowns could crumble, legacies could shatter, and entire nations would be forced to face a past they've denied for centuries. So ask yourself, how many secrets still lie buried in the archives of Europe? How many truths are being guarded, not for our safety, but for theirs? We began with a slave, a woman born in chains. She rose higher than anyone could imagine, crowned as a queen. And then she was erased. Her story locked away in shadows, her bloodline hidden in silence. But secrets don't stay buried forever. They echo. They leak. They haunt the very halls that tried to silence them. And if the whispers are true, her legacy did not vanish. It flows quietly, through families, through dynasties, through names we still know today. The archives hint at it. The erased portraits suggest it. The missing pages confirm it. History has always belonged to the victors. But blood belongs to no one. And maybe that is why this truth is feared so deeply. Because to accept it would mean admitting that the crowns we worship are built on lies, that the line between slave and ruler is far thinner than we were ever told. So tonight, we close the chapter of the Forgotten Queen. But remember this, her story is not gone. It's only waiting for the day when someone dares to open the last vault, to read the last page, to say her name aloud. And when that day comes, history itself will tremble. This was not the end. This was only the beginning.